Welcome everyone. Live streaming Parshat Vayeshev, Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh, and it's sponsored by Be There Israel and Or Chadash. And as always, thank you to Daniel for our ability to do this. Okay. Yes. Okay, tonight we're learning Parshat Vayeshev, page 198 in the stone Chumashim. Okay, tonight we're going to learn a number of different parts of the Parsha. Hopefully they will all merge together, line up together. But we'll start with the first pasuk, Lamed Zayin pasuk Hey, Aleph, chapter 37, verse 1. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And Yaakov dwelt in the land of the dwellings of his father, in the land of Canaan. So, last week we discussed what Rashi says in this pasuk, but we only did half of it. We didn't deal with the full ramification. Last week we mentioned this verse in connection with Yaakov getting a new name, Yisrael, and explaining that the name Yisrael means to struggle, to contend. That's the root of the word Yisrael. Welcome, everyone. There's room. So we mentioned that Yaakov got a new name, Yisrael, and Yisrael means to struggle. What? And we mentioned this verse because here it says, and Yaakov sat. Yaakov, as Rashi says, wanted to sit b'shalva. He wanted to sit in peace. But we saw that there was a contradiction there, because even though we have our moments of peace, we have Shabbos every week, Baruch Hashem for Shabbos, but to expect in this world an constant peace is unrealistic. It's just not the nature of the world. Someone could be very centered on the inside and peaceful on the inside, but they're still going to have test after test after test. That is the nature of this world, and we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that we can attain a complete and total peace in this world. And so this is what Rashi says. Rashi brings, I use the word disturbing because we would all love to sit in peace. We would all love to reach peace of mind and total centeredness. But we see that in our tradition, one would think that a tzaddik, a righteous person, when they reach a certain level, things would get easier. They've reached such a spiritual plateau that we would think either they earned the right to sit in peace, or they would just achieve it through all of their spiritual attainments. But we see that's not true. It's not true. We see here Yaakov has test after test after test after test to the end of his life. And that's what we learn in Parshat Vayechi, that the last 17 years of his life, in a sense, were the best 17 because he wasn't totally overwhelmed with challenges. But peace is for the next world. Peace is for after Mashiach comes, Tachiyat HaMeitim. And we get to all of those through struggling in this world. So, Rashi says, now read the exact words. And this is, it's really deep into the Rashi already. It's not at the beginning. But it says, Vayeshev, what does it mean that he sat? Or he dwelt? He settled. Bikesh Yaakov Lishev B'Shalva. Yaakov sought to dwell in peace, in tranquility. Shalva is more tranquility. Kafetz alav rugzo shel Yosef. So immediately the anger and the confusion and pain of the incident of Yosef pounced on him. So it's like that's what you feel like. Like, is it so bad that he wanted to sit in peace that this terrible thing of losing his son jumped on him? Now listen to the next part. The next part says like this: Sadikim mivakshim liyashev b'shalva. Sadikim seek to dwell in tranquility. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So God says, Lo dayan l'tzadikim masha metukan lehem le'olam haba. Isn't it enough what is prepared for the righteous in the world to come? Ela shemavakshim liyashev b'shalva ba'olam hazeh. That they also want to sit in tranquility in this world? So again, it leaves you with this wow. Is there no hope for us, in a sense? But again, what we said last week, and we'll repeat again, it depends how we look at struggle. If struggling to attain a goal in this life gets us down and overwhelms us, then that's a bad thing. But let's say someone wants to be a doctor. So it takes, from the time they decide to be a doctor till they go through labiyut, undergraduate, medical school, internship, residency, it's an unbelievable journey. And it is a struggle. When you're, during your, fourth 36-hour shift of the month, right? This is a struggle, but it doesn't determine how we look at it. Someone can be like, why did I get myself into this? And someone else accepts it and even thrives on the challenge.
Or the same person can experience both.
Or the same person can experience both. One day this, and one day another. It's true. So that's what it means. Struggle, we're used to putting a negative connotation on it. But let's say, look how Israel was built. Look at the first generations that came, and against unbelievable odds, unbelievable rationing, unbelievable difficulties, but they were into it, right? They had a goal, they had a purpose, they had a mission, and they just plowed through it. And it gave total meaning to their lives. So, when we read this Rashi again, we have, like I said, there's different ways to approach it. But I learned in Rabbi Arieh Khan's book that he heard Rav Soloveitchik explain it differently. And it was a real revelation to me. The way I read it, and I'll read it again, it's like a question. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lo dayan letzadikim masha medukan lehem leolam haba. It's not enough what's prepared for the tzaddikim in the world to come, that they want to sit and shav in this world too? Like question mark or exclamation point. Rav Soloveitchik says you don't have to read it that way. You can read it as a statement of fact. So it says, Tzadikim mivakshim liyeshev b'shalva. Tzadikim want to sit in peace. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God says, it's not enough for tzadikim what is prepared for them in the world to come. Rather, they seek to sit in peace in this world. So it's a completely different reading. In other words, God is saying that tzaddikim, it's not enough for them what's planned in the world. They want to bring olam haba into this world. They want to bring heaven down to earth. And when you look at a tzaddik, why do people gravitate to tzaddikim? Because they radiate a certain tranquility. Even if around them they're being tested 100 times a day, and challenges are coming left and right. People have a very idealized idea of what a tzaddik is. A tzaddik carries the whole world on their shoulders. And here the whole world is starting with their community, and it could be 20 people. It could be 20 families. It could be 200 families. It could be 1,000 families. And then they carry the weight of all of Israel on their shoulders, and ultimately they carry the weight of the whole world on their shoulders. So we look at tzaddikim and like, wow, I wish I could be a tzaddik, right? We have no idea the tests, the challenges, the pain. Could you imagine, having to help hundreds and hundreds of people who come with the most heartbreaking stories, the most heartbreaking circumstances, and the tzaddik has to help everyone. Does anyone think that's easy? Not so easy. But here, the way Rav Soloveitchik is reading this, but what is a tzaddik trying to do? He's trying to bring peace into this world. He's trying to bring heaven down to earth. This is what a tzaddik does. So he reads it as a statement. It's not enough what's prepared for us in the world to come. The tzaddik wants, not just for themselves, obviously, wants to give people a taste of olam haba in this world. So that Shabbos is 1/60th of the world to come. So that's the big thing, to be by the Rabbi for Shabbos and the Tish and the singing and the davening, because the tzaddik is bringing down 1/60th of the world to come. And of course, we all have a spark of a tzaddik in us, and we all can do this. A great tzaddik teaches people to contact their own spark of being a tzaddik. That is what a great tzaddik does. So now let's go back to the first verse, and we'll read it also a little bit differently. We read it, and Yaakov settled in the land of the dwellings of his father, in the land of Canaan. So the word Vayeshev, and he sat, this is, remember, before he left home, he was called Ish Tam Yoshev Oalim. He was a sincere person who sat in the tents. What tents? The tents of Torah. And here it said again, Yaakov Vayeshev. So I once learned from Rabbi Ginsburg that we could read this verse as a verse of meditation. How? The word Megure Aviv, the dwellings of his father, Megure also means in fear of or in awe of. It's like Yira. Megure is like Yira. Canaan, Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Canaan comes from the word Hachna'ah, submission.
Wow.
So he once read it like this. And Yaakov, and remember that Yitzchak, of the three Avot, he was what we think of as the meditative one, as the introverted, as the very focused on his inner life. Remember, he's the one who went out to converse in the fields. So he read it like this, and Yaakov sat in meditation in the place of the awe of that his father had taught him through being in a state of submission.
Yeshuv.
Meaning?
Vayeshev v'yeshuv.
Yeah. Yeshuv also is the root of tshuva. So here we have Yaakov, and is it any wonder, after fighting with Esav his whole life, having to run away from Esav, and then been in the shadow of Lavan for 20 years, and then he leaves, and then he's confronted with the whole incident at Shechem with Dinah. And now we come to this parsha. Is it any wonder that he would want to sit? So, what we can learn from this is that what Yaakov was doing was a good thing. And the way Rav Soloveitchik is reading this Rashi is, yes, we want to bring Shalva into this world, but not as an escape from the world. It's in integration with the world. Now, I don't want to sit in tranquility by divorcing myself from the world. I want to learn how to sit in tranquility and deal with everything I have to deal with. That is the real goal. That is the real goal. To learn to deal with the everyday routines that we have to deal with, and challenges and tests and trials, but to learn to do it from a place of tranquility. So this is a great teaching for all of us. Okay, so then the next verse says, Eila toldot Yaakov, Yosef ben Shva Esrei Shana. And it continues. So it says, and these are the generations of Yaakov. Yosef was 17 years old. So everyone comments, what about all the other tribes? Why just Yosef? So we see from this that as the next verses explain, that Yaakov loved Yosef because he was the son of his old age. That's what the verse says. And he made, if you look at Pasuk Gimel, it says, V'Yisrael ahav et Yosef mikol banav, and Yisrael loved Yosef from all of his children, ki ben zikunim hu lo, because he was the son of his old age. Yasalo ketonet pasim. And he made for him it's usually translated a coat of many colors.
Striped.
Here, or striped, pasim are stripes. The Art Scroll translates it according to Rashi that it was a garment of fine wool. That's what Rashi says. So the Gemara says on this, for all the parents here and parents-to-be, that I can't remember what the Gemara says, but for a little bit of material, that Yaakov made this special garment for Yosef as a sign of his chosenness, he brought upon himself and all of Israel exile. Because the next sentence says that the brothers, Yiru achav ki oto ahav aviham. The next verse says, and the brothers saw that his father loved Yosef, mikol achav, from all of his brothers, vayisnu oto, and they hated him. So that's what the Gemara says, that this garment represented the favored position that Yaakov put Yosef. And because of that, it caused their hatred, which caused them to sell him, which started the whole progression that led us all down to Egypt and into slavery and exile. So we've mentioned a couple of times that the Gemara and the Midrash spare none of the avot or imahot, that they find places of tochachav, rebuke, for all of them, meaning that no one is perfect, and despite there being giants in spirituality, they were not perfect and they made mistakes. So here the Gemara is pointing out a very, very big mistake that Yaakov made here. So I want to give over a very, very deep Torah about this coat of many colors, a striped coat, based on the words themselves. In other words, what exactly does a ketonet pasim mean? In other words, to be able to understand really any concept in the Torah, you have to see what the words used are, not the English translation, but what the Hebrew is, and what the context of the words, how they're used in other places. Only then can you really understand. So that's why Rashi says this is a garment of fine wool, because in Megillat Esther, a similar type of material is mentioned, and there it's clear that it was wool. So that's why Rashi says that here also. Now, this expression of a ketonet pasim, or even the word pasim, is only used a few times in the entire Tanakh. But three of the meanings, this Torah that I'm giving over is a Torah from Rav Ginsburg. That is only on these words, and he uses as a lead-in to understand who Yosef was. So that's why I'm doing this, because we're just starting the story of Yosef. The next 4 or 5 parshas are going to be exclusively about Yosef and everything that happens to him. Of course, it'll include Paro and Yaakov and the sons, but he's the focus here. He's the absolute focus here. So this word pasim is plural. So the root is pas. Pei samach. So Rav Ginsburg brings, and like I said, it's only used, I think, 7 times in the whole Tanakh. One of the usages of the root pas means a great abundance. In another place, it means exactly the opposite of like whittling down to nothing. The word ephes. Ephes means 0, is aleph, pei, samach. It has this word pas in it, ephes. So this is not unusual. This is a fairly typical thing in Hebrew where a root will mean 2 opposite things. And of course, this is the basis of the deeper understandings of different incidences in the Torah, that the same root contains opposite meanings. And so you have to have like the whole picture to really understand them.
2 polarities.
The polarities. And sometimes it's like we see in gematria a lot of times, where you'll have 2 words with the same gematria and they have totally opposite meanings or energies to them. But they're like either bouncing off each other or complementing each other. So the great example is Mashiach and Nachash. The snake of Garden of Eden and the Mashiach are both the same gematria, 358. We learned this last week, actually. So here you have these 2 opposite meanings. And then he adds another meaning of pas from the Gemara, that sometimes the idea of pas has to do with the palm of the hand. And we'll see the significance to all of this. So we're just getting an idea of the different usages of this word pasim. So he points out that in conjunction with this, that the first letter of ketonet is a chaf, and the first letter of pasim is a pei, which itself spells kaf. Spells kaf. So he explains what is the symbolism of chaf. So it can have also 2 opposite meanings. You could like make this motion like this, and the kaf is like representing I need to receive, like I'm holding out my hand for charity or for love or whatever it is. But this motion of the palm of the hand represents, in a sense, ephes. There's nothing in here, and I'm making. Actually, you see the shape of the palm is a chaf. Chaf itself means palm. So it's like receiving, but also you have the exact opposite. For example, the famous song about God having the whole wide world in His hands. So here we hold out our hand as if we have nothing, but it also can mean I'm holding on to everything. I'm holding on to everything. God's got the whole wide world in His hands. So when you have that image, of course, obviously God doesn't have hands. But when we have the image, we don't think of God, in a sense, holding His hands like this. It's like this. God is cradling the whole world in His hands. So we're going to see in a minute how this all has to do with Yosef. We'll see. So Rav Ginsburg points out that the Chaf, thank you very much. Chaf stands for Koach. Koach in this sense means potential. And the Pei of Pasim means Poel, which means actualization. Here you have, again, two opposites. Koach and Poel. Yeah. Yeah, like action. Or a worker is a Poel. Is a Poel because there's actualization. So we see that this Ketonet Pasim that Yaakov gives Yosef is much more than just a symbol of his love or his favored status. Because when we go back to the first sentence, we learn, what does it mean? These are the generations of Yaakov. Yosef was 17 years old. So we're told what it means that he was the favored son. What went along with that was that Yaakov gave over to him the deeper teachings of his own neshama. And this is very, very connected to a midrash, a very, very important midrash, that says everything that happened to Yaakov happens to Yosef. And it goes to a very long list of things that happen in Yaakov's life and things that happen in Yosef's life. I'll just give a few of them, because it's actually a very long list. But Yaakov was one of two brothers from the same mother, and Yosef was one of two sons from the same mother. Yosef is from Rachel, and there were only two sons from Rachel, Yosef and Binyamin. Yaakov was hated by his brother. Yosef is hated by his brothers. Yaakov grew to greatness through a dream, the dream of the ladder. And Yosef attains greatness through interpreting the dreams of the butler and the baker and Paro, and of course his own dreams. Yaakov had to go into exile. Yosef had to go into exile. And it just goes on. There's a long, long list of comparisons between them. So Yaakov, as we're gonna get into, Yaakov has prophecy. He made a mistake, in a sense. I couldn't say that if the Gemara didn't say it, by showing his favoritism. But it was clear to him that Yosef had the potential to actualize more than anyone. Yehuda in the future would, because all the kings come from Yehuda. But in the more immediate, he saw Yosef was poised to be able to actualize potential that, in a sense, none of the other Avot had been able to do. With all of the greatness of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they planted the seed of the Jewish people. But Yosef had this power. He became the most powerful person in the world. Not just in in spirituality, in actuality. So Rav Ginsburg was saying that's this katonet pasim. First two letters being chaf and pei. Potential and actual. That Yosef is the tzaddik. Yosef is called Yosef at tzaddik. He's the only person in the Tanakh who's called a tzaddik. Noach was called a tzaddik, but as far as, let's say, Jewish tradition, putting that name, it's true. Noach was called a tzaddik, but from the time of the Jewish people, though the Torah itself doesn't call him a tzaddik, the Jewish people attached that name to him, Yosef a tzaddik. And the tzaddik is the one who takes potential and can actualize it. That's like part of the definition of a tzaddik.
So maybe you can say that in a sense Jacob initiated the process of actualization for Joseph by giving him that code.
Yeah, in other words, that's the whole thing of his, in a sense, choosing him, because he saw this is the one who can take from me and actualize it the most in the immediate. Because we're going to see in the next weeks the rivalry and the complementary energy between Yosef and Yehuda. Right? So that we're going to have to come to. We'll start already in this parsha. But the Midrash says, I didn't say this before, the Midrash says a very interesting thing. Why is it called Ketonet Pasim? So the Midrash says that it was like, maybe you've seen these sleeping bags, that you can fold it up into this little tiny ball. It's like, the reason I'm thinking about this, we had a bunch of people for Shabbos, and as they were leaving, there was a little sack on the floor, and one of the students said to the other students, he says, "Is your backpack in there?" Like, how did it get so small? Right? But that's what the Midrash says, because again, this word pasim has to do with the palm of the hand. It said that this garment could be folded up and could be held in the palm of Yosef's hand. And that's one of the reasons it's called Ketonet Pasim. But again, this image of the palm, meaning, again, remember the palm also is chaf, which is koach and poel. And that is Yosef's strength. So that's why, and so we're going to use this now to jump into the rest of the story. That's why when Yosef has two dreams, and he tells his family, and the brothers hate him more, and both of the dreams have to do that he will be the leader. And so the second dream, so even Yaakov got upset at him, because he dreamt of the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing down to him. Now, Yaakov knew very well how to interpret dreams. He had two dreams himself, and we've discussed this, and we won't go back into it. And also, in my book, I deal with this extensively, how Yaakov is able to interpret his own dreams and then make use of them. And he translates them into how to deal with situations in his life. So when he hears Yosef saying the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, so why did he get upset? Because he interpreted it correctly. The sun is him, Yaakov. The moon is Rachel. And the 11 stars are the 11 brothers. But Rachel had passed away already. So it took took Yaakov back. Like, what do you mean that Rachel is no longer here? But Rashi explains that he was referring to Rachel's handmaiden Bilhah. That's who he was. Yeah, it was. It was referring to. So after he says, we're all going to bow down to you. So if you want to look, it's on Pasuk Yud Aleph, also of Lamed Zayin, verse 11 of 37. V'yikanu bo echad. So his brothers were jealous of him. V'aviv shamar et hadavar. And his father guarded this thing. Pasuk Yud Aleph. So what does it mean that Yaakov guarded this thing? What it meant is he understood that Yosef was having prophetic dreams. And the brothers were jealous of him. But Yaakov understood that this wasn't just an ego trip on Yosef's part, but it was being revealed to him his potential. So it says, so Yaakov guarded this thing. So Rashi says, what does guarded mean? He anticipated when it would happen. In other words, it's like, this is going to happen, but I don't know when. I don't know how. So he guarded this thing because he knew it would happen. So the whole thing of Yosef is the power to take potential and to turn it into actual. How do we see this further? When it gets to Potiphar's house, so it says that he found grace in the eyes of his master, and Potiphar put everything into his hands. His whole finances, everything. He put it into Yosef's hands. When he was thrown into jail, after he resisted the wife of Potiphar, so it says that he found grace in the eyes of the warden. And the warden turned over everything, and Yosef was running the jail. So you see that Yosef has this uncanny knack of whatever situation he's in. He's a slave, he's in jail, he's able to take whatever potential is there and to actualize it. And then when he comes before Paro, and we'll mention this, we're jumping ahead to next week, but when he comes before Paro, and how did he get there? Because finally the butler remembers Yosef and says, there was this young man in jail who was able to interpret dreams. So they brought him to Paro. So he interprets the dream, and then he does something that under ordinary circumstances no one would do. You don't speak out of place in front of a king in those days. If you remember in the story of the Megillah, when Mordechai says to Esther, you have to go to the king, and she said, but I haven't been called. And if you even step into the room and you haven't been called, you can have your head chopped off. That's how it was in those days. So Yosef was brought to interpret Paro's dream. But when he finishes, he starts giving him advice. And he tells him what to do. Which is like, whoa, like this is holy chutzpah. This is really holy chutzpah. But whatever situation, Yosef sees the potential and he's able to actualize it. He sees there's a famine coming. But there'll be 7 good years first. This is how you take advantage of that situation to prepare for the famine. So once again, this is the deeper meaning of this ketonet pasim. going back, because remember, pas means ephes, nothing, and great abundance. This is actually the whole story of Yosef. How he's able, because if it wasn't for his advice, they would have just eaten up all of the food from the years of plenty, and they would have been left with ephes, with nothing. So he has the ability, ephes represents, in a sense, koach, potential, and great abundance represents poel, represents action, activating. And so Rav Ginsburg says, so how is this done? How does one actualize their potential? I mean, it sounds great, right? Well, how do I do it? How do I do it? So actually, this is a great plug for our leadership seminar coming up in a couple of weeks, because that is exactly what we're going to be doing for 8 weeks, is being delving into, in a very, very real manner, how do we actualize potential? What are the strategies? What are the stumbling blocks for this? So I'll leave it at that, and that way you all have to come to the seminar. Chaim l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam kol niyeh b'dvaro. Okay, now with the time that we have remaining, I want to really kind of change gears here and address something that we already mentioned, and that is the idea of these prophetic dreams. Because you have in this parsha, perhaps more than any other parsha in the entire Torah, different strata of prophecy. I will mention a number of them, and they're all connected. Here, in the beginning, so we have the dreams of Yosef. And Yaakov, as we just learned, Aviv Shamar Devar, he anticipated when it would happen. He saw, this is prophecy. This is going to happen, and I just have to wait and see how it's going to develop itself. And then we have one of the most pregnant with meaning Rashis. If you go to, again, chapter 37, verse 10 Yud Daled. So this is, and I'm going to go over all of this and then go back, how they're all connected here. So here, Yaakov is sending Yosef to check on his brothers. So it says like this: V'yomer lo lech na ra'ei et shalom achecha. So he says, go now and check on the peace of your brothers, v'et shalom atzon, and the peace of the sheep, v'ashiveni devar, and bring back to me a word. V'yishlachehu me'emek Chevron, v'yavo Shechema. And he sent him from the valley of Chevron, and he came to Shechem. So Rashi, an awesome Rashi, says like this, and I'll read it again from the source. So it's on the Rashi in Yud Daled. It says, V'halo Chevron Bahar. He asks a question, wait a minute, Chevron's not in a valley. Chevron's in the mountains. What does it mean, the valley of Chevron?
It's got a valley.
It has a valley, but the it's a valley in between the mountains. Hebron's built like Yerushalayim on a series of hills. So Rashi says, with like a surprise, Hebron is in the mountains. Shenemar, how do we know that? It says, Va'alu b'negev v'yavo ad Hebron. It says, go up from the Negev till you reach Hebron, meaning you're literally going up in altitude. And the truth is, Hebron is in the mountains. So he says, Ella, rather, what does it mean, the valley of Hebron? It says, Ella me'etza amuka shel oto tzadik hakavur b'Hebron. So the word for valley in Hebrew is emek, which means deep. Why? Because it's a deep ravine in between two mountains. That is what a valley is. But listen to the subtlety of the Hebrew here. I'll read it again. Ela me'etza amuka. So he says, rather it's hinting to the deep. Here, etza usually means advice, but here it means to the deep plan of that tzaddik, meaning Avraham, hakavur b'Hebron, who is buried in Hebron. Listen carefully. L'kayam mashnem